I'm going to deal with some subjects that are essentially esoteric here. So if I say something that somebody doesn't understand, please raise your hand. As Vince pointed out, yes, I raced, I was on Pro-Am drag racing team for a while. That's basically a stock team. We run stock cars with a few modifications to them. My top speed, quarter of a mile in the top speed was about 9.6 seconds with a top speed of about 124 miles an hour. Quarter of a mile, that's not very far, that's 1,300 and something feet. If you're at 9.6 seconds, you're essentially out-accelerating people about 22. If you were to lay an average 6-foot human end to end all the way down, you would be accelerating at 9.6 seconds and covering that quarter mile distance. You would go past about 22 people every second. You often come out of the race, you come up, and your car comes off, nose of your car comes off the front of the ground, off the ground. So you're literally flying blind. You don't know where you're going. So most racers tie off their steering wheel so they don't turn the wheel. Because if you turn the wheel and start sliding out, you're probably going to wreck. So I always tied off my steering wheel so I knew where I was going. But I'm just giving you a little background and a little overview. What I want to do is tell you how it all began. And as Vince mentioned, I was a latchkey kid. I had choices of watching afternoon cartoons or going to Grandpa's body shop and playing 20 questions with the mechanics. So I would often find myself down there hanging out, just spending time together, seeing what was up. Bothering Grandpa, bothering the mechanics, just doing what I could to be a kid. As time went by, I gained more responsibility, became slave labor for the shop, doing things. Vince mentioned I went out with the race teams all the time. My grandfather owned a funny car team. They were high end. It was a funny car team, and they raced at high speeds. I mean, their top speed at that time was probably, for carbureted engines, probably 250 miles an hour with track times of a quarter of a mile, at about 6.7 seconds roughly. So my job at first was basically to pick up bolts. Now, on a typical racing scene, you have 2 tracks. They go straight down the track, and it's single elimination. It's like the NCAA tournament. You got 2 teams playing. One team is one team. 2 teams are playing. One team's eliminated. You're done, unless you happen to get higher up, and you find yourself competing for 3rd, 4th, and 5th place if you lost. So there was a lot of downtime when you went to the racetrack, and oftentimes you would go over your car, look for problems, maybe switch out the carburation jets, just things to make the car run better, run faster, depending on the atmospheric conditions that you were in. And part of the problem was when you took parts off cars, bolts may be different size. So if you took them all off and you laid them in a pile, it could become a little cumbersome to reassemble the car. So my job as part of the funny car team was to take bolts as mechanics took them off the car and bag them in a bag so that, mechanics would say, "I'm putting a sway bar back on, I need sway bar bolts," and I'd walk over and I'd hand them the bag of sway bar bolts. And that way bolts would just fit on, immediately bolt on, and everybody just went there, we got the car back up and running as fast as we could. But one day my grandfather shows up in the shop and he says, "Come here, I want to show you something." So we walk up, there's this big, huge, gigantic crate, wooden crate. And he takes his crowbar and he opens it up, and all these tubes fall out, about 4-inch tubes. And I'm looking at him and I'm going, well, I don't know what it is. I know it's something, but I don't know what it is. So he walks over to the shelf, he picks up his Encyclopedia Britannica and says, "Look, it's a midget car." And I look at this picture of this midget car and I say to myself, "Whoa, we're missing a bunch of parts, because all it is just tubes. Where's the sheet metal, Grandpa?" And he goes, Oh, not a problem. I've instructed all the mechanics in the shop as they take fenders off of cars to put them all over here in this corner, and then you've got to go through and determine what's salvageable, cut the parts at the lines, weld them together, and then run it through the mill to make them smooth. So at about age 13, 7 months later, I have a full-bodied and assembled car. And Dolly Parton had a song about that time too called "The Coat of Many Colors." Well, that was my car. It was the car of many colors because we had varying pieces of fenders and hoods and quarter panels and everything else that we had welded together and put to make this car. About the same time, we happened to have a car come in known as the Rolling Fireball, for those of you who remember the Ford Pinto. And at that time, the car was about 7, 8 years old. And so the paint supplier who we bought our paint from said, nobody's called for paint for a car like this in a long while. So here's a bunch of it. So I took that paint, we painted it, and on that day we rolled that car up onto the trailer in preparation for my first race. That car was sunshine yellow, a very popular Ford Pinto color at the time. My first race was at Roseville Speedway. We stopped at my grandfather's favorite place. There was a guy by the name of Stub Seams. I'll never forget this guy. He walked the waddle because he was so overweight, and he always had a cigar in his mouth. And so we pull up to the gas station, we got the race car fully loaded on the trailer, and he's speaking to himself, and he goes, "I hear you're beginning your race car career." "Yes, sir." He goes, "I believe in supporting race car drivers that are beginning with good pedigree." Okay. If I can put a sponsorship on your car, I'll cover your gas and tires for your first race. I like that idea. Go for it. So he waddles back to his shop and waddles back out, puts sponsorship. Most sponsorships are, about yay big, this big. No, whole entire hood. Wow. Doesn't matter. He's my sole and only sponsor at this point. So we load up, we head down the road, we get to the racetrack, car's fully gassed up, tires are on, we fire the car up. My grandfather walks over to me and he goes, "Where's your mask?" "Mask? I don't need no mask. I got my stylish aviator glasses." And at that point, I learned my first racing lesson. When you're on a sand track, you want a mask. Because when the tree went from red, amber, yellow, blue, green, and the green flag came out, I got sandblasted. And because of my inability, lack of skill of knowledge, the inability to handle the car, I quickly figured out that my skill wasn't quite up to some of the skills as the other people. And I was under pressure of being lapped. And at that, I learned my second lesson of racing. It's a term called rubbing. For those of you who don't know what rubbing is, it's a great CHP maneuver, or called the pit maneuver. And essentially in racing, you have a banked track. You're flying around the track at ungodly speeds. and you get bumped. And when you bump somebody, the goal is the car goes up the track. And the driver is usually skilled enough to regain control because he's going up. Well, in this case, my inabilities, lack of knowledge of the car, lack of knowledge of the track, I go up, he bumps me, I go up the track, I come back down, I wreck him because I don't know what I'm doing, I hit the center median, I go back across the track, and I go right through my sole and only sponsor's sign at the track. And with that, you now know the story of how my first race ended and how I lost my first sponsor on my first race.